Well, while we're waiting around Carlos, do you want to just at least start off? We'll go around the horn since we only got a few of us here. We can do a quick intro. I know Brandon and I've already met you. The other guys know me, but again, consolidated. Now I'm the executive director for BTB, and the way I'm kind of viewing all of the full-time positions here is as a paid internship. So I get my hands dirty with P&L, marketing, hiring and firing, all the other kind of stuff that go with being a little quasi mini CEO of a nonprofit with that protection buffer. And then I should be able to spread my wings in another year and a half and do whatever's next, to include this being a possibility. So that's kind of like my current status.
Awesome.
PJ, you want to hit up your current status and remind Brandon where you're coming from?
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, how you doing? Caleb,
Good.
nice to see you.
See you too.
Yeah, I'm currently serving as the chief of staff at Beyond the Brotherhood, focusing primarily on the operations side. And I really enjoy just working with the fellows. And my main interest in this, aside from the future, is seeing if we can find any fellows that can really find job satisfaction with a venture like this. I think a lot of the guys are very inclined to be entrepreneurs, run businesses. They like having that control. And I think this is a great space for them to grow and professionally develop.
Cool. Caleb, you want to remind everybody where you're coming from?
Yeah. So I did 8 years on the teams, mostly all on the East Coast, Team 4, Trade at 2. Got out in 23. And moved my family to Montana and ended up purchasing a mechanical, electrical, plumbing contracting business out here in Montana, and I've been running it ever since. Joined BTB in 2023 as a fellow. So yeah, passionate about the subject matter today, and hopefully to be a resource to the guys in the future.
All right, Rich, you want to tell us where you're at right now?
Yeah, I'm based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Did 8.5 years in the teams at Team 5, and then last 2 were at Trade 2. Caleb and I went through buds together. We hooked up and started out with BTB, and then I've been kind of bouncing between jobs since I got out in 23. Right now I'm at wholesale commercial insurance, and then looking to do entrepreneurship through acquisition with small business, or possibly looking at a ranch right now. So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right, Jimmy, you're last.
Yeah, Jimmy May. I retired in 2023. I've started 3 businesses, sold 1. I've got 2 right now. I'm handing over the reins to BTB to Drew, and then I've got Mayday Executive Services, where I do high-end, safe executive events. So that's me. Over.
Cool. And then everyone else, there's Carlos Mendez. He's a legend. I got to work with him back in Trade Ed during my early E5 and E6 years. He's a total stud, super sharp guy, and he's doing a big thing for search funds. And I'll let him do the rest of the intro. But I'm super stoked to reconnect with him since joining BTB and see how what he's up to can also help our fellows. Go ahead with those.
Thanks, Drew. So I did 21 years in the Navy, 18 of those in the teams, enlisted and as an officer. Got out, went to business school, became an investment banker where I worked on leveraged buyouts for the most part. Then I worked at On Front with Jocko for about 3 years full time, and then left there to join Lucas Hill, which is an investment firm. We mostly seed hedge fund managers on day one, but we've recently raised a fund to back vets that want to do search funds, mostly because my buddy Kyle and I, he's a partner of mine, runs the firm with me. We spend a lot of time with vets that are transitioning out. And as we have these conversations with them, it just seems like the ETA route is just more well suited for guys like us that have a lot of experience under our belts It's better than being an associate at a consulting firm or an investment bank, just basically building these enormous freaking financial models and decks out. So that's when we're like, hey, why don't we help these guys out? Why don't we start a fund to actually back them? Because as you all know, the first capital is the hardest capital to get. But once you get over that 50%, then other investors start jumping in. So that's where I'm at now.
All right, cool. I see Dave jumped in. So Dave, why don't you give us a quick brief history of where you're at right now?
Yeah, sure. Shotgun. Appreciate that. Just kind of jumped in here.
I mean, we kind of get like, how long we were in the teams and where geophysically we're located and what we're doing right now and why we're kind of interested in this ETA and search fund approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely appreciate it. Yeah, 20 years in the teams, retired in 2019. I'm here in San Diego. I've got out and done a few various things, supply chain, logistics, manufacturing, all the way up into like doing project management and helping a few startups. Currently running a few of my own like startup companies and a foundation, just trying to get it going. But yeah, looking for work and trying to get into something new where I could kind of just be my own boss and not work for other people. So thanks.
All right. And Brandon, you're going to be presenting first. So why don't you tell everybody where you're coming from and what brought you to present this to BTB for us?
Sure. So Brandon Chikotsky, I'm a professor at TCU, also the managing principal of a family-led business brokerage. We help clients buy and sell businesses. We particularly focus on microcap and Main Street, so companies that are valued under 10 million, typically folks that are individual buyers or searchers that are coming into acquisition. I've been in private equity for over a decade, began my first appointment as a graduate student at New York University in the sister campus in Tel Aviv, Israel, and was essentially raising money for defense tech that was contracted or given commercial license by the Chief Scientist Office of Israel. And so the United States was often a really good buyer for us. And I, before that, was a lobbyist with AIPAC that focused on military aid appropriations for the United States and our ally Israel.
Cool. All right. Floor is yours.
Awesome. All right. Just to confirm, you can see our deck here.
Yep.
Awesome. So I'm going to run a timer. I'm going to do my best to stay within, say, 20 minutes or so. And if you can start to think of questions that come to mind, I'll do my best to answer. Sometimes the wisdom of the market comes a quarter or two later, but I can give you some synthesis or ideas of what I've seen just having been in the space long enough. So God Bless Retirement, the name of this business brokerage, was what my dad exalted when I helped him sell his business. I immediately bought the URL because I remember thinking that is a beautiful branding and overall title to help folks in the established generation sell their business. And I think putting God first meant a lot to my family, and then just in the way that I want to represent our business in helping folks. This was initially just a pro bono thing that I did for my dad and eventually some of his friends. So I helped two of his friends and helped those families retire. And I have the luxury of being a professor where I'm not, and having been in private equity with some windfalls, right? I'm really not wanting as much as I think a lot of people, if that makes sense. The Maslow needs have been covered. Well, in this kind of altruism, I realized I could really help people. And so when I choose who I want to help patriots, and I want to help strong families that are faith-led and faith-centered. And so that's just created a lot of good favor locally. And we've just begun to take deals outside of Texas and build the resources for that. So that's the spirit of how we began. So a business brokerage means that we help folks on the buy side and sales side. Sometimes business brokerages will specialize in one side or the other. The reason we do both sides is because we have what's called a bird dogging team. I'll explain that later, but I just want to put a pin in that. So let's begin first with the concept of Navy SEALs being really bad employees. And what that is that you guys are sometimes too smart, too disciplined, too regimented, and have just been better coached in high stakes scenarios, whereby if you go into a company in a middling job, even if it pays well, and you start to see inertia, bad behavior, negligence, any of the things that could have gotten your buddies killed, and then you're in a company context, you may not filter it the same way as other people who have made a sport or a living out of failing upward or just being mediocre. And in my opinion, mediocrity is offensive. I think many of us will share that sentiment, and I do treat business as high stakes in part because these are people's livelihoods, owners in particular. All right, so that's kind of the concept behind the concept. As for the concept, buy then build, this was originally a title from a professor that launched a movement of searchers. Searchers are where my cursor is here. Searchers are these people that spend their time looking for businesses to build or several businesses to roll up into a stronger vertical. Now, the book that I'll share a link to this at the end. The book talks about buying a platform business. And what that really means is a company that you would consider healthy. And if you have a healthy business, then you can add on to it like a platform. And if you take technology and fix analog process to create systems where before they were manual, or to accelerate through tech what was previously rotary or offline, those are easy margin enhancements and opportunities to grow within the company itself. And then you can tag on, or you can build one back office and then just add other operational acquisitions and then fire the in-house officing they have to create a right sizing and ultimately stronger vertical. We'll get into those things later, but the first things I want to do is give you a moment to digest this data. So kind of look at the middle part of the screen here. Just spend a moment thinking through this. What this data essentially says is that many people who want to go big find themselves small. Many of the folks that think they can use a bunch of virtual assistants to help them are going to end up having to do it themselves. A lot of folks that want to buy something that's, say, a discount purchase are going to find that they still have to pay a competitive rate to get into healthy companies. And then you guys are typically stronger and better. And that gives you this great advantage to pursue deals and win deals. So there is some kind of like market wisdom that's actually, I should say, some market myth that you can certainly dispel. And then you guys also can just be more effective in your pursuit. So the real wisdom is in the data, and the data is typically in the multiples of EBITDA. That's earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Think of it like the holy grail multiple of how many banks lend and how many people buying a company can determine the health of a business. All right, so when looking into why pursue a career instead of a job, the whole point of this is to have no ceiling or to have bandwidth control. I have found personally that when I work 100-hour weeks as a proprietor, I'm way happier than when I work 50-hour weeks as a subordinate. Now, it's not always that way, but most of the time. And I think it's just some people have an inherent ethic and leadership capability where there's less pain in just the control factor of having your own ownership in high stakes. All right, I'm going to get down into here for targeted fragments. So when you look at sectors to potentially buy, like home services, safety, security, logistics, manufacturing, roll-ups, typically people look for companies that they have an interest in, or they look for companies that have a kind of financial criteria. I want to just have you rethink this. I'm not saying completely get away from it, but the way to think about searching is that there are thousands of companies, even within your own area, say within a 1-hour driving radius. That what I recommend is you do build the criteria range, so a range value of what a company's size or performance would be, and then pick one sector to start where you have a kind of buying thesis. And the reason is that if you just shop agnostically, you'll run through two problems. One is a decision paralysis, though you may have higher discernments and not deal with that, or a better filtering mechanism like software or other to help you determine good deals. But the other is that you'll have too many options by which your middle funnel and bottom funnel won't be effective. And what I mean by that is you won't have the opportunity to talk to 3,000 business owners. And so you might actually miss deals because you were not narrow enough. think of it like hitting too many targets at once when you really have one bullet. And the aim is to get you into a market sector, into a space where you have the profile of a business, and you have the working partner who's selling to give smooth transfer, or at least a willful transfer instead of offering any kind of hindrances. And then when you are searching, you can build a deeper expertise. All of that said, you do need a secondary sector. Now, I should say that some sectors have subsectors. So if you just choose, quote, logistics, well, then you have all these subsectors within it. There's warehousing, there's third-party logistics, there's all sorts of shipping that you can get involved in, transportation and logistics. So you do kind of want to narrow as much as you can, and then you can segment based on geographic or other criteria. All right. What I'd like also you to do is either pencil questions or feel free to interrupt me.
What's the Wi-Fi password?
I'm sorry?
Delicious coffee, 1502.
I think that's errant noise.
Jimmy needs to mute himself. It sounds like a distraction on a personal thing.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, all right. So when you look at small businesses, you're always going to find something ugly. We call it hairy. So the hairy parts of a business are typically the kind of Pareto principle problem, and it's usually really an inverse advantage. So the Pareto principle, as you might recall in work life, is you put a kind of 20% input and get an 80% output, or you just have an 80-20 distribution almost in a natural order for some kind of efficiency pursuit. Well, in the case of small businesses, you might find that 80% of earnings rely on 20% of a clientele, or it might be worse. Almost all the earnings resides on one client, and then everything else is fractious. And so oftentimes what you're doing in buying the business is relieving the proprietor of risk. And so you can discount the purchase based on the vulnerabilities of their business that they may never have seen because they never lost that client due to a personal relationship. So you now take that risk, but you have to sell the discount purchase price based on this risk they never perceived. And so you have to almost break the framing of somebody who is living in the inverse Pareto principle, or has essentially created a kind of outsized value set of their client pool. All right, so beyond the kind of spiritual path in life, or beyond the mission path in life about why to buy a business, there is also a unit economic consideration, or just a kind of financial principles decision. In many cases, the lower market, particularly under 10 million, these are going to be a low EBITDA multiple by which you can come in there with leverage. You don't have to use much of your own capital. SBA loans, for example, will fund 90%. Veterans will likely have other creative financing potential. There is sometimes a standard 20 or 30% down if there's a heavy real estate or asset-based purchase. But those assets can also be assigned to the loan structure, giving you less capital burden on the front end. There's also earnout deals that you can make with sellers where you're able to come in with no cash down of your own and work a timeline or vesting out schedule where the seller is being paid out based on the performance of the transfer. So when you look at middle market deals, which is where I like to begin my day in reading and PitchBook and other M&A sources, I'm looking for acquisition behavior. I'm looking for the performance or activity of the cost of capital in the market. Right now, we have what's considered a high cost of capital. The interest rates are make it in a way punitive to take leverage, take any kind of credit compared to what we had just 5-6 years ago. That said, there's signal that we're going to have 2 rate cuts in the next several quarters. As such, we can assume there's going to be an accelerated deal action or M&A behavior. That just simply means people are buying and selling businesses. The middle market has a downstream effect. With liquidation events, banks have more custodian funds. There's more wealth management or assets under management, which means they have less to borrow from the Fed. So if you're in a strong primary market like DFW, where I am, that means you have a cheaper cost of capital among issuing credit or among credit issuers, regional banks primarily. SBA loans are typically from or administered by the regional banks that I'm mentioning. So we want middle market to be healthy and do well. We're always rooting for them so that in the lower market, we get cheaper capital. or at least the opportunity for that. When you build a relationship with a banker, what you're doing is going to them and saying, hey, if I have something unorthodox in buying a business, and you're going to finance this and take the risk of issuing me credit and the promissory that I may or may not pay it back, you need to pitch it to your board. So I'm going to, but since your bank is so healthy and can pass the stress test because you have so many assets under management in this fiscal year compared to the previous year, then I assume that as a veteran, and perhaps because I'm willing to apply a leadership ethic, your bank will give me more favor. And believe it or not, those kind of soft skill considerations still apply as long as you meet kind of the deal thesis that banks are used to. What that means is that you're not doing anything of ill repute. There's no risk for fraud, and you're buying something that makes sense to them. And if it is novel, like say Bitcoin mining, or something that has a digital asset or secondary market trade like NFTs or something like that, you just have to make it in such a way that whatever you do collateralize or whatever you do offer, like more likely more cash down, it is something they can readily understand in the banking context. All right. So I just want to further validate that buying a business is a normal behavior. You might feel like you live on a psychological island. You might feel like because you're buying businesses and no one else is, they're all pursuing jobs, that somehow you're some strange animal. Well, I actually want you to, in a sense, own that you're different than the folks that are in subordinate roles. But you're going to have to, you have a higher threshold for pain, which means it'll take you longer to accomplish your mission, but you'll end up in more control. And with more control means typically more value capture. All right. So how do I come in? So a broker our job is to help you source, move into a deal, win the deal, get into a contingency offer. Contingency offers mean you're in due diligence. And then on the output of that, we get the deal done if it's good and safe for you to do it. The way that a broker should operate is we are like your point lead or your front person, and that we are able to source or bird dog deals, evaluate the viability as to how it aligns with your buying thesis, which we'll build together, and then vet the efficacy of all aspects of the business you would prospectively buy, determine the hairy parts of that business, move into an offer. The offer, assuming gets accepted, which means we won among all other offers. We then go into a contingency agreement to begin our due diligence. During due diligence, our job is to lead that effort and ensure that we value the business. And in the valuation work, it's very academic. Hence, I leverage the resources at the university where I serve on faculty. I have a small army of graduate students, as I like to joke about, and that with just a board, I can build a boardroom of nerds to ensure that we kind of honor the spirit of the deal. Then getting to the end of the deal is really about negotiating and getting into an asset purchase agreement that's formal. And then we move it into an escrow third party, and then everybody gets paid. That would be the seller gets their monies. The banks typically move their money. The broker gets their fee applied, and then you as the buyer, you acquire the assets in the business. The fees that my firm offers is that we charge $10,000 on the front end, and that includes, on the buy side, we charge $5,000 on the front end. On the sale side, we charge $10,000, but on the buy side, it's $5,000, and that puts us into the buying thesis planning, and then it gets our bird dogging team geared up. What that means is my sales professionals begin organizing data and building call out scripts on your behalf, which accelerates the deal searching timeline. And then on the third month, we start charging a $1,500 retainer, and we typically discount our veteran folks. And so I just want you to know that we likely drop down to $1,000 a month, and then we run and gun until we get a deal done. The average time it takes to get a deal done is 9 to 18 months. So if you're going to include a third-party brokerage like us or have a brokerage working with you, you do want to have capital set aside. We can sometimes defer the fees into our commission structure. So that's what's called a success fee. At the end of the deal, we charge 5% of the acquisition cost. So that means if you bought a business for $10 million, we would charge up to $500,000 depending on the scope of work. But most of the time, you're in the $5 million or under range of acquisition. And so we're really not in the way of the deal. Again, we're also open to negotiating that success fee rate to ensure deals get done, particularly if there's a counterparty. As to bird dogging, the way a brokerage typically works is they will represent the LOI submissions, they'll represent the valuation work, and then they will go in and get the deal done through negotiating and third-party resources that they refer into the deal. For example, if insurance is needed, appraising, a preferred banking relationship where they know that the banks can do a really good job. But one thing I notice they don't do, which we do, is build call teams. Call teams are in-house Americans calling on your behalf. The 9 to 18 month average is the market's average. Or excuse me, the 9 to 30 month timeline is the market's timeline. But we're typically in that 9 to 18 month range to find a business and get all the way to close. The quickest I've ever seen is 1 quarter, but that's typically an all cash offer. I'm going to give you all just a moment to digest this content here. All right. If not using a brokerage, which is usually a great way to begin learning, I would recommend building an aggressive top of funnel. What that means is through, say, meta ads or data acquisition of business owners that are in your deal thesis, that you build, say, 1,000 targets, and then call every one of them. And that's after the filtering gave you those optimized leads. You can typically get through 50 to 200 calls if you're working part-time per week. If you're going full in or all in, you can get through 50 a day, if not more. And when you're engaging business owners, you have to ask them if they've ever had a value of their company, and if they've ever had any offers for anyone to buy their company. Introduce yourself in your role and your background, and then establish that rapport, and then speak as a buyer, which is, my family and I would be very interested in buying our business. We're independent, so we're not here to hurt you. We are genuinely interested in helping you retire and then carrying on the legacy of this work and potentially growing this business. We want to own it. And they'll say, oh, that's interesting. Well, make an offer. And they say, great. And then you want to start doing valuation work, but that requires typically a lot of all their financial data. While a broker's job is to get that information, you can still get it as a searcher. Typically what you want to do if it's a non-listed business for sale is give them a list of all the information to provide you. If they are actually willing to do that, you can use an AI engine to get a soft valuation. You can even have a banker evaluate and determine if that valuation makes sense. And if you can get that seller to agree, then so be it, go, run and gun. It's rare that process works so smoothly, that it can be so independent, so to speak. But I want you to know that you're working in an inefficient market, and that's why so few people do this. If you have a high threshold for administrative burden, pain, the time even of searching and sorting and getting to a deal that you find attractive or interesting, then you're probably in the right place. In my opinion, procuring a business in 2025 is so painful that it's exactly where I love to work. And it's exactly and it's kind of the clients who also love to be in the space where there's high friction, where they know they have a positional advantage. So there is deal action, and the loans are getting lower, which means more people are bringing cash to the table. You'll hear soon from a search fund or a sponsored fund or a syndicated fund where they raise money and bring all cash to the deal, and sometimes don't need leverage to get into the deals. At which case they can accelerate the deal action. They can buy at a discount with the incentive of getting things done quicker, and they can even buy distressed businesses, which is again to their advantage, especially if they're buying multiple businesses at once to roll up. Roll up strategies just mean you pack several businesses together, give them one administrative center point, and the rest creates an aggregate value in terms of their service capacity to the market. As for the opportunities in this like high friction environment of buying lower market deals or buying lower market businesses, I want to draw your attention to this bucket right here: ugly businesses. In my opinion, a bad business that doesn't have strong recurring revenue or doesn't have healthy margins, say they're net neutral, net negative, in my opinion, ugly businesses are great opportunities that many people reject. We will service and broker on the sale side and the buy side. We will service ugly businesses. The reason is because they're discounts. So if you want to come in and you believe there's margin enhancement opportunities, you can fire a bunch of people and replace them with software and right size the business and right size the books, lower the burn rate, perhaps even procure new clients or spin up a sales team. Anything that you can do to better operationalize this business. If you see something that the seller or the incompetent leaders or managers are doing that you know you can improve, that's sometimes the sight, the peripheral sight and advantage you need going in. And then because their books are what they are, because the value of their business is so low as it is, as the market kind of real value would demonstrate, it's very challenging for the seller to get more than, quote, the market would prescribe. In which case you can come in and kind of win on the purchase. Sometimes buying a healthy business is actually a bad strategy. Not always, but I just want y'all to frame the lower market as a bit messier than what you'd find in the middle or high market, and that can be to your advantage. So there's something called Silicon Valley math, which is when you are selling software and you put someone on a subscription, you can have a 11x or 12x multiple on that first purchase. Most people factor at 10x because it's just simple math. So let's say you have someone paying you $20 a month, you can forward project or performa $200 a year. And then you would assume the lifetime value is going to have, say, 2 or 3 years runway, in which case all you need to do is just get as many people in that subscription as possible. That means you're running a user generation strategy, usually through content and a content strategy. And so I like to see SaaS business acquisitions for first-time buyers if they have a kind of sales competency and believe in the efficacy and durability or defensibility of that tech. So that would be a tech solution in a place where the market has laggards, where there's high friction, where some of the bigger technology companies have less interest to get involved. Those are typically really good plays. I was just learning this morning about a software that's coming out to help people sift through their emails to determine K1s, where all the K1s are. K1s are whenever you make a private equity deal, you have to wait for these tax documents at the end of the year, and sometimes they don't even come when they should, and they land in your inbox, and you have to give them all over to the IRS to report your positions, especially if you had any kind of windfall events or any losses. And so with these K1s, we need software that will agentically sift through all of our inboxes and all of our correspondences throughout the year, and then organize them into one template that the IRS requires. And that has been done manually, mostly by CPAs. We've been killing the guys doing that. And so now software is about to launch to do that, which has a very strong AI tooling. That was one example where I knew there'd be very few competitors, relatively cheap to build, and you would have every single LP in America, which would be a limited partner or accredited investor, every one of them would be a viable buyer. And those are high earning, high net worth folks. So it's like almost a perfect confluence of building or buying a SaaS technology that you could just win through sales. All right. So as for who you would be competing with to buy a business, let me make sure I got, yeah. You're going to be competing with private equity funds that come in quicker and buy more cheaply on their deals. You can beat their offers by just having full offer LOIs or a little bit premium offers. But the only way to do that is if you can substantiate the money on your end. Let's say you're buying a tire shop. Well, the tire shop is listing itself for $1.1 million. Private equity firm says, hey, we'll close this deal in 30 days if you'll sell for 800 grand. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that, but we love the speed and we don't trust private equity because of the reputation's a little bit tough. And unfortunately that is the case. But I love working with my private equity partners, by the way. I'll explain that maybe later. But all to say, you come in as an individual buyer and you say, hey, I'll buy at, say, 1.1 million, just the way you're listing it, full offer. Here's my LOI, and I can substantiate that I can get financing for $1.1 million if you don't mind just working a little bit slower, because the timeline of an SBA loan, for example, is, say, 90 days. They'll say, you know what, let's do it. And then so just the way to win deals typically is just to come in with premium positioning in terms of what you're willing to spend. But then during due diligence and negotiations, you can kind of work that number down if needed, as long as there's a good logic to do so. So roll-up strategies are typically how private equity is getting into the lower market. They're buying a bunch of different units. They're rolling them up into an efficient sales and accounting structure. So you'll have in-house HR, in-house accounting, in-house sales. And even if they're, say, contracting that out, they're doing so efficiently that they're building the higher multiple exit. The exit strategy is they buy enough units, they sell it to another private equity group typically, and then that holding fund or that operational PE group in the middle market pays a multiple that's higher than the lower market individual unit purchase. So you would get maybe a 2x, 3x EBITDA exit if you were just a single proprietor of one healthy business in the lower market. But if you own 10 of them, you're actually going to get sometimes 3 to 8x multiple, sometimes even higher, depending. All right. The last slide I have here is really about strategy, which is to substantiate financing. What you really need is a provisional letter of credit from a banker that says, if we got into this deal with you, we will be able to bring the money. We are honest buyers. We are serious buyers. We can do this, assuming that the deal is in good faith, assuming everybody's honest and transparent, which you can kind of lead in that effort. Then the seller should feel assured to take your LOI, which is a letter of interest, to pick you as its prospect buyer, to pick you to go into negotiations as a fair counterparty, and to pick you to get the deal done, and know that they will get paid. All right, we'll land here. We're at 28 minutes, and so we have technically about 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more if we want to push it. And I'll do my best to give kind of a tight answer in response to any questions.
Yeah, I got one question. Just you mentioned don't go in there agnostic. Pick some of these ugly businesses. I think some of us are like, all right, well, the HVAC stuff doesn't sound sexy. A flower shop, doesn't sound sexy, but it sounds like those ones might have the biggest cash return. So is it more like, all right, when you're thinking about what sector to go into, kind of be open, but at the same time, like, don't cast too wide a net. I'm kind of trying to figure out how do you vector that down?
Yeah, you're kind of almost all on it. So the one thing I would adjust in that kind of assessment is have an agnostic approach in the early part of your search in kind of a learning frame. Be willing to let good deals go. Like just watch and learn and review. I would absorb as much content in a rapid learning state as you can on the front end. Almost like you're painting the canvas from blank slate. So I like to go to broker conferences where I see other brokers learning about the market and deals, and there I'll find searchers, and I'll ask, hey, are you a broker? Because I'm just talking and chatting in the hallway or whatever, and they'll say, no, I'm here to learn how to buy a business and how brokers figure out how to negotiate and do deals, because you're kind of like a pseudo broker in the lower market. As a buyer or searcher, you're gonna kind of almost style and think like we do. So on behalf of a client, which is typically a family that is or sometimes a family office which wants me to go buy 3 or 4 units for them in the lower market, and they're just kind of one-off deals. I have to think about first principles. Would the business work? Would it make sense? Can we get it to profitable? Can the cash flow go well? And then what are all the things unseen? Now, once you've learned the first principles of acquisition and like buying strategy, particularly, and also sourcing, then I would recommend getting really narrow, which is to say, all right, I've looked at enough, I've seen enough deals, I've seen enough concepts around valuation packets and valuation theories. I know income valuation method, I know asset multiple valuation method, I know forced liquidation values, and then I also know goodwill values. Those are all kind of principles applied into a methodological or a valuation assessment. All to say, like, if someone says my business is worth 10 million, your discernments should be in almost quick order and through a deep dive, pretty similar. Like, I now can get a gut read or sight read, so to speak, from looking at P&Ls and maybe a 3-year financial history within 5 minutes, whether or not a business has a certain range value. And then when I do a deep dive into that business, almost always I'm close to that range value, if not on target. That's just from having seen enough deals. So I kind of want you to think that way too. Then when you get really narrow in the sector, you'll know the distinct behaviors of that sector. Like healthcare has just a different valuation experience because they have all this compliance standard and administrative burden, and only recently have they had software products that have helped operationalize those. And so when I see doc in the box, or sometimes high books of business client services like dentistries, things like that, but they don't have much software implemented, that's a ready opportunity. So I'm still looking for inefficiencies on behalf of my buyers, but I would only know what those inefficiencies are if I have, by having studied that sector, or my team in Mindshare having identified where the friction points are. The last thing is ugly sometimes means that the sector itself lacks innovation, or is aging out, and so they're not energetic, they're not innovating. Or ugly might be that the business is underperforming, and the symptoms are not necessarily structural or even the company, but rather the people. Or maybe it's they just need a slight pivot. They need a new brand position. They might need just a different service community. There's ugly sometimes really just means opportunity, and that's the other part of the discernment.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Brandon, this is Carlos. Just out of curiosity, what would you say the percentage of traditional searchers versus individual searchers you work with is?
Yeah, I started off only sales side, and I got overwhelmed in the best way. I mean, at first I was just doing it for my dad's friends for free, because I love these guys. They raised me. They're incredible. And then I realized how incredibly hard and complex the lower market is, including my own dad's business to sell, which was a small business. And I realized that the middle market and lower market have the same complexities, and the lower market have less sophistication. And so the bankers and the people involved in the buy and sell side stakeholders, they're all kind of sometimes they don't always behave well. And so I began to realize that the buyers needed advocates. They needed protection. They needed a faith-centered steward. And I actually think it's the biggest protection is against other brokers. The other brokers come from failed roles, like they were car salesmen. Believe it or not, I see a lot of that, like actual car salesmen, insurance salesmen, people that couldn't do well in the other sectors. They find bigger commissions. You know, I told you about 5% success fees, typically what we charge and what we make whenever we get our deals. Well, the counter brokers make the same money. And so they're just like, these brokers are everywhere. And the clients I often deal with have come from a bad breakup from another broker. And typically they ran them up through a retainer fee, didn't do anything for them. They don't bird dog. And there's not enough deal action, and they're not honest. So now I have about 30% of my deal flow is buy side, and 70% is listed sale side. But I spend more time on the buy side because we're bird dogging, because we're just actively running the engine, doing top of funnel, getting a bunch of leads, having my team call on those leads. Then we talk or meet with those prospective sellers. We determine if it's worth putting an LOI or a bid on that business, especially if it's off market. They don't even know what an LOI is sometimes. I have to tell them, the counterparty, what we're about to do to potentially buy their business. Say, hey, okay, expect this letter from us. It's non-binding, but it gives a value of what we're willing to pay. And then eventually we'll get the value totally exact once we go into your business and do our due diligence. And we want you to know that we're a family working partner here, and our buyers are great people. We're going to be honest, and we ask you to be honest too. And typically they'll have their CPA connect with us, and then we're able to get all the data and all the information I can turn around within 2.5 weeks and get a valuation packet. Sometimes 3 if it's really complex. And then we have a very defensible pricing. So the work on the buy side is way more, but it's way more fun. And I think it really strengthens America and strengthens Main Street, because we're just getting a lot of young buyers into these legacy businesses, and that gets me pumped up. This is my expression of patriotism, and the idea that as goes Main Street goes America. Well, anyways, on the sales side, when I'm listing a business for sale, I've already just done the valuation work, and then I put it in the market. And typically the market comes to us. Now I can bird dog on the sales side, though it's not always needed. There's just so much buying interest and so many searchers out there, so many PE funds in particular that are really aggressive. And so I get a ton of inbound interest. And then my job is just to filter which of the prospect buyers are going to be the most ethical, the most fair, and can substantiate financing. So knowing both the experiences of each side has really helped. Particularly, it's helped the buy side.
Cool. All right. Should we turn it over to Carlos and then we'll kind of do a end cap question and answer at the end of it?
Yeah, I'm going to drop some links here. Got this event coming up. Every month I host events from my firm. If anyone's in Dallas, Fort Worth, we host monthly topic events. This one covers defense and venture. Just a great way to meet private equity folks and innovators and company owners, along with a ton of bankers. And we always have money in the room as well, which means a few select family offices that are deploying capital. And so in the registrant pool of people that come, or firms that are represented, just about every bank in town. This, by the way, is how you can vet a good broker. Do they know all of their regional bankers, particularly at the executive level, that solves financing problems? And that's why we host these events. We ultimately want to ensure that the money is going to be there when the deal can happen.
Yeah, so I'll go real quick just because I have to jump off here in about 12 minutes or so. I'll just quickly explain what we do here at Lucas Hill and how we could be of help. So here at Lucas Hill, we traditionally back traditional searchers, right? So it's just one of the many different ways that you can buy a business, right? You can be an individual searcher. You can have a single backer, but a traditional search fund is where you're raising capital from anywhere from 10 to 15 different LPs or investors. We just happen to be one of them. So we like to sit at anywhere between 5 to 20% of the cap table. And what that does is it gives you an advantage in terms of like, hey, when you're picking your LPs, you're trying to pick your LPs strategically, meaning you're picking investors who can help you throughout the process, who can help you throughout the search process, who can help you throughout the valuation process, and then who can help you on that back end as well. Once you purchase the business, like, hey, can you help me solve some of these problems that we come across? And so here at Lucas Hill, we like to offer help both during the search. So my partner, Kyle, he's actually run a search before, so he understands the in and outs of running a traditional search. We were both investment bankers, so we can help on the valuation side, looking at these deals and telling you, hey, is this a good deal or not? And then on the back end, like I said, I worked at Echelon Front on their strategic side, their consulting side for 3.5 years. I worked with every industry you can think of, from professional sports teams to healthcare, construction, and helped solve some of their problems as we sat in on their strategic sessions. So we offer that as well on the back end. Once you've purchased the business, hey, I'm running into some of these problems. I need some help. Let's say, for example, you've got supply chain problem. Okay, cool. I know someone that I can link you up with that can help you with that. So that's what we do here. There are different advantages and disadvantages, right, to doing a traditional search versus an individual search. And if anybody's interested in just hearing my 2 cents, we can talk about it offline as well. But I think there's advantages to both, right? On the individual side, yeah, you're going to own the majority of the company, right? Whereas in a traditional search, you're going to end up with max about 25%. If you do it with a partner, you're going to end up with about 30%. But I would encourage guys to model it out, because when I modeled it out, my partners modeled it out, you know, you could either own 100% of a smaller business or you can own 25% of a much bigger business. Brandon kind of alluded to the fact of the advantages that you come in with having cash up front, right? Hey, we've got $600 million under management right now. And some of our LPs, they actually said, hey, that fund that you have right now, it's too small. But if you have a buyer who's got a big equity gap, we'd love to jump in. So we can compete with some of these private equity companies. We can come in at a much higher price point in order to buy a bigger company. So I'll kind of stop there and see if anybody's got any questions. I just want to quickly throw it out there. Hey, this is what we do. And I'd love to be able to answer any questions that you guys got about a traditional search. We have in the past looked at individual searchers, but typically the economics don't really work for us because the deals are just too small, quite frankly, and they're just too much in favor of the actual searcher.
Okay, so one question then, you know, for both of you, I guess, if a guy wants to get started, should he just go to, I think it's bizbuysell.com and start looking at different companies in the area that he wants to live, and then kind of like start there for his due diligence, and then understanding like, hey, if I only need, you know, a small amount of money, then I'll go to Los. If I need the whole thing, then I'm going to need to talk to Brandon and kind of figure out that SBA loan and everything else in between. Is that where we're kind of at for the guys that are thinking about it? Like, for instance, Rich.
No, I'd stay away from the biz buy sell, at least on the traditional search. So if you're trying to do a traditional search, your step one is to come up with an investment thesis. And what I mean by that is, hey, I want to buy a home services business in the Midwest or in Texas. Or you could say, hey, I want to buy a home service. And I'm just throwing home services out there because I feel like those are the most popular. And I'm willing to move anywhere. All right. So you're going to have to present this to your possible investors, because what you're doing is you're raising a fund of roughly $500,000. And what that $500,000 does is it basically supports you for about 2 years for you to go search for a company. So for 2 years, your only job, and I'm hoping that it happens before 2 years, but we're giving it 2 years. You have 2 years to search for a company. So you'll negotiate a salary. I've seen it anywhere from, and honestly, you get to pick your salary, but careful what you pick, right? Because you're pitching it to investors. So if you're saying, I'm going to give myself a salary of $300K, well, your 500K is not going to go very far, right? And eventually you're going to have to pay that back in equity. Typically what I've seen happen is anywhere from 115 to 150K salary. And now the rest of the expenses that you're using are for searching expenses, right? So you're setting up your LLC, you're setting up your holding company. Maybe you're getting the services of a broker, and that's what you're using that 500K for. So step one, at least on the traditional search side, is to come up with an investment thesis. You're putting together a presentation that you're going to present to investors, because the first thing that you need to do is raise a fund of around $500,000 to start that search fund. Now, once you acquire the company, now those investors, like say, for example, that I came in at 100K, right? I gave you 100K of that 500K. I now have the rights to purchase 20% of that company once we acquire that company. I have the right, but not the obligation to come in pro rata. So when we buy the company, let's say it's a $10 million company, I have 20% rights to that. And I could either take it, right, and give you the 2 million to give you the 20%, or I could just say, hey, I'm good with the 100,000 that I invested. And now you have an equity gap. Does that make sense, Drew? At least on the traditional search side, that's how it would work. Step one, you're coming up with an investment thesis. You're coming up with a presentation to give to investors, and you're going to raise a fund of roughly $500,000.
Okay. Raising the fund means SBA loans and making cold calls. What are we talking?
Negative. It's just investors like us. Like, we give you the money straight up, bro. There's no banks. There's none of that. That's the advantage of it, right? Like Brandon was saying, you're coming in, you're saying, hey, I've got some pretty big, heavy LPs. Like my partner, Kyle, was telling me that one of the biggest advantages when he was going to brokers is, listen, they're kind of the gatekeepers at times, right? And if they don't think you're serious, they're not going to give you a ton of attention. Whereas if you come in, you're like, hey, I've got LPs, and combined my LPs have, AUM $5 billion, right? Now they're like, oh crap, this guy's serious. He's got the money. You can come in and buy that thing cash. We don't need a bank to come in that process. That's the difference.
And
yeah, the bank is when you're ready to close on the deal. That's when you start in the bank and SBA and all that.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, and you can come in with that as well. But in terms of just the search fund, Drew, you don't need a bank. You don't need any of that. You're just looking for investors who are typically funds like ours, maybe family offices, maybe wealthy individuals, maybe guys who have already done a search and sold, and now they're investors. That's typically who's investing in those search funds.
Okay.
And just for reference, I went the other route. I did the self-funded route. So if anybody's interested in kind of that process or what that looked like, that was my process to purchase the business that I bought.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you've got two different sources, two different paths. Like I said, you got to figure out for yourself what's the right path for you. So Caleb would be an awesome source for that. If you're thinking of traditional search, I think Kyle and I would be a good source as well. So yeah, just different paths and whatever's right for you, quite honestly.
Rich, you
That's
got
all I got on my side.
For your search right now, I don't know if that's the right word, but you are searching for, like a regenerative ranch. What should be your first step? Or do you already got it figured out?
Sorry, Drew.
Right now I'm putting together like a business plan and just like a pitch deck with using AI. So that's kind of where I'm at with that and just doing market research around the Arizona area.
Hey Drew, if I could, I just jump in here because I feel like we're looking for a starting point for guys that are just kind of thinking about this. I would say starting point would be figure out how you want to fund this thing, right? I would say that's step number one is start talking to guys like Caleb and say, hey, tell me how it worked for you for a self-funded search. How did that process go for you? Then you can talk to guys like myself or Con, be like, hey, how does that work in a traditional search? I would say that's step one. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Caleb? That's where I would start if I was like, hey, ground zero, I don't know where I go from here.
Yeah, I mean, and also just doing your own market research, reading the books like Brandon put in the chat, kind of getting a better idea of what it takes to do a search, to buy a business, learning about it, kind of learning the lingo when you're talking to brokers, and when you're learning how to read financials, what it means when you see a SIN for a business that's for sale. Yeah, that's kind of the starting point.
And Caleb, you did a lot. Lily helped you out a lot, right? Is that correct?
Yep, she was one of my investors.
So that for you guys on the line as a BTB fellow, we've got a lot of people who are interested in investing in you. And Caleb just happened to meet her at the Triple S, I believe. Actually carried her around the building slightly drunk once. I had to ask him to put her down. But obviously he mended that relationship. And you know, these are the kind of connections you can make through these events. Over.
Dave, you got any questions for where you're at? I mean, you're just starting out in San Diego. I think you sound pretty entrepreneurial with your other things. Have you explored any of these options before?
I mean, you know, it's good to hear kind of a start to this. You know, it's something I've considered. You know, while I'm kind of been in and out of a few different jobs, and I'm looking to kind of like run my own business or even buy another business. And yeah, I've kind of really had no clue where to start. So it's kind of good hearing this. But as far as where I'm at right now, yeah, just looking at the moment.
And Nolan, I know you're pursuing your MBA right now. Is this kind of like in the line of what you might be getting towards after you finish your full-time MBA?
Yeah. Hey, comms check. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Can.
Cool. Yeah. Trying to get this thing fired up. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Drew. And thanks, Brandon. Sorry, I came on a little late. And to answer your question, yeah. So in business school right now, and planning on launching a search after my summer internship. Still going back and forth between traditional and self-funded. Question for Brandon, as you kind of mentioned it, as this kind of lower middle market space becomes more kind of commercialized within search, I've been hearing a lot about obviously buy-side brokerage, but also buy-side advisory, which is kind of a kind of river guide hand-holding service that you pay a definite premium for. But I just wanted to kind of ask you what is that type of premium service offer that you don't? Because it sounds like you guys crush it as far as bird dogging, finding deals, helping you analyze it. Yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, we style as kind of a buy-side advisory light. Am I muted? Let's see here.
Nope.
Good. And but we also are a traditional boutique brokerage, lower market. So we target industries and business profiles. We activate them through calls and emails and texts. And sometimes emails do work, though we notice that the calls are still old school effective. We've even had budget, depending on the buyer profile, where we can send out mailers and have something tactile in their hand. That's been really good. We've even done strategic placements in magazine ads or trade ads where we know that the buy side call to action will be seen by those business owners. And we have a fee structure on retainer with a success fee like a brokerage, but we're not going to be on your cap sheet. So we're not a sponsored fund. We don't raise or syndicate money. So we don't insert ourselves in the deal. We're just targeting deal sourcing, and then we can work the whole deal to close. So it's like a one-stop shop in that regard. We've even had pocket deals where our current listings, if it's a local interest, we could get you into our current deals that we have listed on the sales side, and then we discount commissions on everybody. It becomes a really accelerated deal. The last thing we do is we do evaluations in-house, and we do it way cheaper in the aggregate cost. And that's just because that's where I learned first how to do financial services in PE. I started as an analyst and then became a salesperson raising money, which is really deal making. And so when it comes to sellers' discretionary earnings or EBITDA and multiples and valuation work, I can do that very quickly. And my team and I, that kind of small army of nerds, we get that done. So I would still call us a buy-side advisory, but since we do all these other things, we just kind of use that blanket word brokerage. Last thing on this, if you use just a buy-side advisory, you're going to have a good experience most of the time, assuming you vetted well. But they will then have to refer you over when it's time to work the deal most of the time. If not, then they're a mid-market or lower mid-market firm. And you need to make sure that they are prioritizing your deal action because you're such a small commission on the deal size that they might ring you up on retainer and not show you their workflow or their outbound efforts. The bird dog.
And then when you say refer you over, do you mean like to a capital partner or to a bank, or like what do you mean refer you to who?
To a
like
broker.
a QB provider? Oh, okay.
Yeah, sometimes there'll be an iBanker that's like doing a private deal. And meanwhile, they're still representing sponsored syndication or some other kind of deal action. But here's what I've seen in terms of like unfortunate circumstances where it's not really bad behavior, like I was talking about with unethical counter brokers in the lower market where everybody's kind of unsophisticated. I said that just loosely, and it's not always that way. There's good people, but in the middle market, you have these firms that are kind of not well known, but they're huge. A good one locally here is called Generational Equity. They take 25 million EBITDA to 100 million EBITDA. Just huge companies, great companies, lower market, mid market companies that everyone finds really healthy, and they do spin outs or they'll do acquisition strategy or maybe full liquidation, and then all the cap sheet gets cleared, and these are huge windfall events. So they build super angels overnight, so to speak. Well, if you go to them and say, hey, I want to go buy a $10 million company, they're like, great, yeah, I'll help you. And then they're your buy-side advisory, and whoever that junior broker is that took the deal, they're going to charge you $3,000 or $4,000 a month retainer, sometimes more. They may not prioritize your deal because they're working on that huge middle market thing. And so after like 4, 5, 6 months, you check in, hopefully sooner, and you're like, hey, can you show me the call flow? Can you show me the lead flow? Can you show me how many companies have you talked to? Do you have a team under you doing this? They may not have an answer. And that happens. And I don't actually think they're behaving bad. They just don't have the incentive as a bigger firm working on bigger deals to necessarily lean all in and go almost like zealous in a patriotic fervor, like the kind of civic call to action, family call to action on behalf of an individual buyer or searcher. You are seen as an ugly client, so to speak, because you're just buying too small. But I find that is like the way to save America. Like I have a whole we're a different deal. So just be careful. A buy-side advisory is probably the most capable, most resourced, and the wealthiest firm to apply what you would think is a good outbound or bird dogging function. But they don't necessarily have the structural incentive to really help the micro cap deals.
Got it. Thank you. I do have one more question. I know we've been talking for a while. Can I get one more in?
I'm good. Yeah.
Cool. To your point on such a small business, such a small fish, I was talking to actually another prior soft guy. He runs an investment bank here in LA, and he's like, hey, all you guys why are you looking at such small companies? He's like, it's literally harder to buy and operate a business doing $5 to $1 million in SDE or EBITDA or whatever than it is to capitalize a $20 million business. And you're not going to have to personally guarantee it. You're not going to have to do all that, but you don't necessarily have the connections within M&A to find said deals, and you're going to start competing with PE. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on like kind of focusing on maybe a 2 to 4 million in EBITDA range versus a 700,000 to $1 million, and what that does for the cap table, et cetera.
Yeah, I actually think in that the very thing he's saying is the reason why you probably still should look into it, because
Yeah.
his firm and the roll up or even just like the full acquisition approach, probably one company buying another company is usually how those style, or even if it's a fund that's working as a holdco, or just or the fund maybe buys 3 or 4 businesses, which kind of behaves like a family office approach. They're really cash flow and quality of earnings sensitive. And you're
Mhm.
right, like it's actually easier. And they bring a ton of capital and they can work quickly and they have great credit lines and really good executive hiring teams. And I mean, they have what they need to do that. That's his experience. Because the lower market's uglier and harder is why you'll be a full proprietor, a single proprietor
Right.
of a value company of under 10 million. That essentially you could get $1 million salary a year, okay, and effectively have one of the strongest capital and cash flow positions or income positions in your city, and you'll still get that quote advice or critique from that guy, okay,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think he's getting at the personal guarantee of the five to do a $10 million deal. You max out the SBA at 5, maybe some seller rolls some equity, but you're still like you're putting up your whole family and your house and everything on that 5 million versus maybe a $12 million deal where you can use the business as the guarantee. I guess maybe just looking at the risk of it.
That's assuming the business has assets
Right.
to sign over.
Right.
And most of the time, Main Street does, these smaller business does. The problem is, however, is that he's not counting for you raising funds, building a board, and having
Right.
less ownership. And then you have to perform in that business enough to negotiate buybacks, if not contracted on the front end, which most of the time it is. So these early investors are getting earnouts or getting paid either just through distribution or liquidations. And also, they expect you to have a growth schedule, and so you have this kind of different pressure, and it just depends on the kind of experience you want. I mean, I came from that market where everything was aiming toward efficiency and less pain, and letting capital have a compound power. I love it, but there's something about the lower market where things are so hard
Right.
and messy, where you get full control, and then you also get to make your own rules, and you can still land where they are. And guess who's buying you? It's those guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that exit is almost like a spiritual path. And there's something there in the inefficiency and friction of underperforming businesses where I think you can buy at a discount in such a way you have less competition. That's why I want y'all to look ugly. Like what I mean is look toward the ugly. Like y'all should look strong, but go into maybe net neutral or barely profitable businesses where there's not much income claim, and immediately look toward margin enhancement. And PE firms do that too. You're competing with them there as well. You just have way less of it. And also your threshold is just going to be different. Your high touch and all in strategy and stakeholding is different. As for like putting your family and mortgage on the line, I really don't think you should do that anyways. Just never do that. You want to de-risk the best you can. And when you're buying, you should have an operationalization strategy that if it fails and you still are on the hook for an SBA loan, you're going to be employable because the story makes sense, whereby you're going to be okay. And yeah, you may soft land into like a 3 or 4 year block where you're working to pay off that loan and honor the loan, which will be discounted in a bankruptcy, by the way. And then you try again. And like I'm not saying that this is a strategy. I'm saying 1 out of the 10 guys that fail, they don't fail in such a way where it's like truly a mayday. Their family's okay. They're just not going to have the windfalls yet. They're not going to have the breakthrough wealth and proprietorship and ownership. The lower market is for 2 types of profile buyers, and I mean like micro cap. So the real small businesses under the SBA limit. It is for the high agency, full control, spiritual path. That person who's like, if I'm in full control, all mistakes are awesome. All successes are awesome because they're mine. And I see something here in the small way that I know I could maybe go from 1 to 2. And then just that journey on is something so meaningful And there are reasons why there are a bunch of brick and mortar, a bunch of boutique 3PLs and warehouses. Like, these things exist because a lot of people are like this. The other profile are the folks that are buying multiple units, and that's typically PE, but it can also be individuals. Like, I have a buyer right now. We're buying a marble slab. This marble slab brick and mortar franchise has been profitable for 26 straight years. Okay, they have a lease agreement that goes 5 years out. It's pretty good, and they're going to have 200 grand in income this year upon acquisition. They think the downside is 150,000, right? And they don't have to manage it because it has 2 part-time managers who just wanted to keep doing the job. They love the little humble life. There are people that have a humble life, so they're going to go buy this. And then with the relationship now in the franchise and the PE group that owns Marble Slab, they're going to go open 3 more units right away. They just have to run it for about 24 months. So they have a 4-unit strategy over I think a 3-year or 4-year timeline, whereby they're going to end up with a $500,000 conservative outlook in earnings if they do it right. And yeah, they'll have debt, but they'll also have the ownership stake in that franchise. And that's just a franchise kind of like low ceiling approach. You can have the same roll up strategy where you're income interested and then also exit interested and just do it yourself. It's just slower. It is more expensive in terms of capital, cost of capital, and higher stakes in terms of the liability you take on. And everyone will say that's crazy, which is sometimes where you have to be based on your like lifestyle choice and local stakeholding interest. Also, time and control over time. I personally, as a 90% owner of my brokerage, the other 10% is my brother. I answer to no one. I can take pro bono clients, and I have. It's awesome. I've been called crazy once a month, and every time I treat that as data, and then I do the thing that I know is spiritually right, and almost always in the long arc of business, it has a way outsized return in life and quality and bandwidth, mindset, well-being, and the earnings do come.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon, I got 2 questions. On the buy side representative, how would you delineate your responsibilities between a buyer's attorney and the buy side? And the second question is, what would you say percentage-wise you're connecting your sell side listings to your potential buyer clients?
If I were not, God bless retirement, I would say that lawyers typically get in the way of deals by adding friction and trying to make themselves relevant through negative hypotheticals. So most of the time, we're dealing with standard contracting. In Texas, we have the Texas Association of Business Brokers, and almost all language is going to be derived from those templates. And so they've created a standardized deal flow. And anyone who's bought or sold a business has seen that language before, and any anomalies now can be dropped into an LLM to determine if anyone tried to get one on us. Any kind of like shadow lines, just putting clauses that don't belong. So in that sense, there is a lot of plug and play and self-management. It's not hard. But when a lawyer is almost like a business person first with legal training and has an interest in supporting deal action rather than making themselves relevant as a lawyer, then I've found them incredible to work with. I love it. They're smart. They're analytical. Typically, they're family lawyers of a family office that's representing the second, third generation wealth consideration. So they just don't want to blow the money. They want things to have return. And they're great. They're really great. Our in-house counsel is my sister. She's a lawyer. She's mean as hell. And we kind of have a little bit of like a battling energy where a counter broker is misbehaving, for example, and we see material misrepresentation from the seller, and we're on the buy side, and we're able to negotiate them. We chew them up. We can negotiate them down. And because my sister is who she is, we can preserve the relationship because I'm my another Tchaikovsky or one of our hired brokers are softer and nicer, and so they come in and kind of like soothe it out. And meanwhile, the buyer themselves never had to engage, and so all the kind of tension was handled by the suits. That on the buy side, that's kind of the strategy we like. Though sometimes we do need to just bring the buyer and seller together to sit at a table, and for the first time, everyone gets to be honest, and then we get out of the way. I've noticed lawyers rarely know how to do that.
Cool. Thank you.
If anybody else got anything, is this about time to wrap it up?
I'm just really appreciative of you, Brandon. I have a couple businesses. I run in the same way. I work with really good people. I'm playing the long game. Maybe I take one for the team on earlier when good people will always come back to you. And that's who I work with. Same feeling on lawyers too. Trust lowers the cost of transactions. Most of my contracts are handshakes and emails, and we do what they say. And if they burn me once, they won't burn me again.
I would think most guys are scared to mess with y'all. So I would say just run into the muck. You're good.
It ain't that kind of world anymore, man.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's weird. Yeah. People seem to like challenge and disrespect strength. If they see you're a strong man in particular, they think it's worth standing against, and it's very odd. What's right is wrong.
On top of that, you're right. If someone files a restraining order on me, they're going to do it. Like, oh, this guy's an Navy SEAL. He's turned to death. Screwed.
Yeah. Well, most buy side on the low market is actually a kind of it's a generative thing. Like people are appreciative that you want their company, and you're going to help them retire. And so they're kind of rooting for everything to go well. Most of the time, it's goodwill. There's like a good faith, energy, and momentum. Mm-hmm. But it does happen where things can get tense. Yeah. I appreciate you too.
Well, thanks, Brandon, for all of this, putting this together. We'll be posting the recording to all the other guys that weren't able to make it, and just can't thank you enough for everything that you presented here today.
Thank you. I respect you guys tremendously, and I'm grateful to you for the life path you've chosen, and where you are now. I think is it's an awesome opportunity. The lower market's messy and tough, and that's why I think there's opportunity there. I would recommend, again, start looking for ugly things and find opportunity in that, and just stay tough and have a high threshold for pain and a bias toward action, which I already know is ingrained in you, and you'll likely have a competitive advantage no matter who you compete against.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, boys.
See you guys.
Toward action, which I already know is ingrained in you, and you'll likely have a competitive advantage no matter who you compete against.